Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. You and I are being victimized right now by a space hoax. Yesterday, the alleged Orion spacecraft went into space. Yes, it did go into space. Yes, it is called the Orion. No, it is not a spacecraft. What's worse, we're being told that the Orion is going to get us back to Moon and Mars, the Moon and Mars. That is totally and completely false. For a cost of approximately $365 million just for the rocket launch alone, not to mention the costs of the spacecraft. We were sold a bill of goods. First of all, what took off yesterday is not a spacecraft. It is a tin can. It's a big can, the outer shell of what is designed to be an Orion spacecraft. Someday, it had no guts. It had no life support systems. Nothing with which, none of the equipment you would need to carry asteroid top of this alleged space vehicle. It was a dummy. It was a phony launch abort system. A launch abort system is there so that if you have trouble with the rockets on takeoff, you can take the capsule, lift it away from the rocket, and save the astronauts. Well, this giant launch abort system exist. The entire process, the entire piece of hardware that you saw yesterday looked very much like material from the space programs of the 1960s and early 1970s, because it was a repeat of the technologies of the 1960s and 1970s, 50-year-old technologies. Just for one example, to go to the moon and come back successfully, you have to have a heat shield so that when you enter the atmosphere, you do not burn up like a meteor. You do not burn up like a shooting star. The heat shield that's used on the so-called Orion spacecraft is 50-year-old material. It's called Avcoat. There's a far newer material called Pica. Avcoat and the material that was used cannot possibly withstand the entry speeds required for a return from the moon. In other words, you could go to the moon with humans in what will eventually someday, in another 10 years' time, be an Orion spacecraft, but you can't come back because you will burn up in the atmosphere. What's worse, if you try to go to Mars, your re-entry speed is much, much higher. There is no way whatsoever that this so-called Orion, so-called spacecraft could ever make it through the Earth's atmosphere and get astronauts safely to Earth after taking those astronauts to Mars. What's more, the Orion spacecraft has no means of landing on Mars, and once it gets there, it has no means of coming back. There is no Mars program on NASA's books. There is a 2009 Mars reference architecture. The senior analyst of the Space Development Steering Committee, the group I run, has done an extensive analysis of it. It is a non-program. It is a program too expensive for any nation or combination of nations to afford. Why? It all depends on vehicles you use once, extraordinarily expensive vehicles, and then throw away. There is only one person on planet Earth today with a doable Mars program. His name is Elon Musk. He is reusable vehicles, so that you do not just buy a vehicle as if you were buying a Rolls-Royce and run it until the first tank of gas runs out, and then buy another expensive transportation. With reusable rockets and reusable vehicles, you can buy your Rolls-Royce and use it for the next 20 years. That's what Elon Musk is planning. So what do we want to do here? There's something called the Space Launch System. It's a Senate to enable to get Americans into space on American vehicles since 2011. And if we go along with the so-called Space Launch System and Orion plan, we will not see Americans going into space until 2024. That's a hideously long amount of time. The program that is keeping us out of space is called the Space Launch System and the Orion program. We need to kill them. Why? They are sucking up $3 billion a year of your money and mine. If we took that $3 billion a year and put it into the development of all of the hardware that's necessary for a real Mars program, for example, fuel depots in space, so that you could take a rocket into space, put the second stage in orbit, refuel it, and take that second stage to the moon or to Mars, so that we have successful landing vehicles that can land on the surface of the moon, that can land on the surface of Mars. We do not have that yet. So we have transport vehicles that once you've arrived on the surface of the moon or Mars, you can trundle around, so that you have ISRUs, in situ resource utilization devices that can turn the water and the carbon dioxide, the water in the surface of Mars, and the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of Mars, into fuel that can fuel a rocket to come back from Mars. These are the things we need to develop. We need that $3 billion a year. Kill this monstrous senatorial and congressional piece of giant pork that is keeping us out of space. Kill the Space Launch System. Kill the Orion. Stop giving us hoaxes. Give us a real space program. This is Howard the Humongous speaking to you from the future. That it's your job and my job. Slimy, sneaky, sinister, impossible, devious little off button. I think I found it.